Sadly, this is the last video in Mim's Halloween special week. Fortunately, I'll go back to my regular schedule. Joining me today is CoffinBrood. On his channel, you'll find true scary stories. Link to his channel is in the description. Check him out and be sure to subscribe. Now for today, our special treat is true horror stories. I hope you enjoy. When I was in high school, I knew my parents' divorce was imminent. My mom was cheating on my dad, and my dad was cheating on my mom. I did everything I could to prevent my parents divorcing, but I knew it was a lost cause. My mother had been planning to leave him for a long time, and eventually served him on my 17th birthday. They agreed to live under the same roof until I was out of high school, so I wouldn't have the stress of having two homes. When I was a little over 18, my mom had been consistently conversating with new men on multiple dating apps. She even got an app that I was known to use called Kix Messenger. She fell asleep with the app open one night, and I'd seen that she was messaging a man named John. I'm not using his actual name due to privacy concerns, obviously. I ignored it, but I'd known the name and seen the face multiple times on her cell phone. Fast forward maybe 2 months. My dad and I were just spending time together and wanted to go out somewhere to eat. His friend called him up that night. My dad has been known to be a social drinker who frequented local bars. He had many good friends that were bartenders and fellow social drinkers. His friend was at the local bar and met a man named AJ who was looking for my father, by name, in order to buy a vehicle. My dad is a car sales manager. So we stopped by the bar that night because we just thought we'd eat there. The bar isn't really shabby or the typical bar most would think of. We live in a small town and the bar was on the lake and people could rent lots to put their campers on. It was like a club/lodge. This man introduced himself as AJ. However, I recognized him immediately as the man who my mother had been conversating online with. I didn't say anything to my dad at first. I for sure thought he just looked similar and I was overreacting. That is until he called me by my full name without anyone introducing him to me or even saying my name. He knew my first, middle, and last name. He also came up to me to greet me at the table I was sitting at. He tried getting me to open lotto tickets for him and was rubbing up against me and trying to touch my inner thighs. I was kind of frozen and didn't know what to do. He eventually left me alone after he saw people staring at him. I did what I knew to do. I Googled John's full name on Google and Facebook. And that's when I found out that he was a registered sex offender/ex-con in the bordering state over. I looked repeatedly from AJ to the man on my phone screen, and there was no doubt he was the same dude. He only lived about 30 minutes away from my own home. I pulled my dad to the side and told him that this man was not who he said he was. I showed him the picture and the information I'd found. I ran to the bathroom crying because I knew something bad was happening. He'd lied about his name, knew both me and my father's name, and knew where my father worked. After hearing this info, my dad refused to go outside with AJ. He made multiple attempts at getting my dad outside alone to take a look at my dad's truck due to the fact he wanted something similar. He eventually stopped pushing my dad and went outside for a smoke. The manager of the bar immediately locked the doors and locked him outside, refusing to let him back in. Everyone in the bar, most of them were close friends of my dad, had seen how suspicious he was acting, and many had seen him rubbing up against me. The manager called the cops to report him. It didn't take him long to figure out that he'd been caught, and he attempted to leave the bar and drive away. My dad followed him up the road, trying to make sure he didn't get away. However, he was plastered and ended up crashing in the snowbank just up the road from the bar. He was caught by the police and charged with a DWI. He was jailed just 5 minutes up the road from my home. I did not sleep a good night's sleep for about a month. If he knew my family as well as he seemed to, he probably knew where I lived. He was bailed out only 2 days after the incident. His vehicle had been found with duct tape, drugs, rope, a crowbar, and other materials in it when they impounded his car. He was also charged for violating his probation. He is a Tier 3 sex offender. He'd raped a minor with a deadly weapon and was required to register for life. He was not supposed to leave the state at the time of the incident, not supposed to have a Facebook or almost any form of social media where he could reach a minor, and was not allowed to even operate his vehicle due to his license being taken away. I also ended up pressing charges for sexual harassment as well as getting a restraining order against him. I also found out later through phone records and the police tracking his phone that he'd driven past my home more than 20 times in the week leading up to the incident. He'd also been to my dad's job and my school multiple times throughout a period of 6 months. He'd been following both of us for a long time. I have never experienced something so crazy or scary in my life. I live in a completely different state, thousands of miles away now, thank God. But my family is still in the state that the incident happened. He still has yet to be charged or arrested with the harassment/stalking charges, and probably never will, seeing as he knows if he comes back to the state, he can be arrested if he so much as pulled over because he has a warrant out for his arrest. Since then, I do not ever put my full name on any social media. I only put my first name, except for things like Facebook. I've become a very paranoid person when it comes to my full name and my address or other personal info. Please, everyone, be careful who you talk to on dating sites. You never know who's behind the screen or what their true intentions are. And if you do find someone you like, investigate and do your homework. I lived in a town with a population of 5,000, and I never once thought this kind of thing could happen to me. But it can, and it will happen.
This happened years ago, but still affects me to this day. The summer after I graduated high school, I was still living at home. I was up late one night and was packing for a camping trip with my friends. It was unbelievably hot and had the window open as I sat in folded clothes. It was around 2 in the morning, and the next thing I knew, there was a hand coming through the gap in the screen of my window. I screamed, and the hand flew back. I was stunned, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was my younger brother pranking me. I got up and looked out the window, and just saw the figure of a man staring back at me. I ran into my brother's room, and he was there playing video games. We called the police, who came and searched the area. They found nothing, warned me and my parents to lock the windows and doors, and left. We were all still shaken up, and my mom had a feeling that he would come back. It turns out our mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited on our back porch. After 20 minutes or so, she saw a man dressed in black slink into the backyard along the tree line. He hid behind a tree for a few seconds and ran to the other tree and hid there, slowly working his way toward my window. My mother yelled something to him, and he took off running. The police came back out, and again, found no trace of him. I opened the window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed some motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of that. About 6 months later, my friend and I got an apartment downtown together. We were really excited. This was our first place on our own. The apartment wasn't exactly the best quality, but it was so fun to be living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only. After a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was taken but a single rose sat on the passenger seat. It was creepy, but I vowed to be vigilant and safe. I always tried to park close to the entrance near the lights, but often it was difficult to get those spots, and I would often have to park further away on darker streets. Things quickly began escalating at this point. My car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left, but once a pair of men's underwear was left. And even more creepily, once a bag of Tootsie Rolls, as they were my favorite candy. This made me wonder if the person knew me personally, and I started to become suspicious of everyone. There was laundry in the basement of the apartment, and one day I went down to get a load that finished drying. As I started to fold, I realized all of my undergarments, bras, and panties were gone. Another week, and I had a male friend over from high school, and his tires got slashed during the visit. By the time the first letter arrived, I had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for me that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved he had been watching me closely. I was able to arrange for another friend to take over my lease and moved in with another friend on the other side of the city. It was a secure building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. I felt much more secure, and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then my roommate got a boyfriend. Most of us were weary of Ashley's new boyfriend from the beginning. For one, they met on MySpace after he reached out to her. Another reason was that new boyfriend, Matt, was extremely good-looking, and while Ashley was a wonderful person, she just wasn't the type you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She'd never had a boyfriend and really felt like he was a Prince Charming. I thought he was weird and creepy from the beginning. Matt was on the quiet side and always seemed to be sporting an uncomfortable, lingering smile. It was difficult to carry on any sort of conversation with him because he would always make it weird with some random facts that were completely unrelated to what we were talking about. I had deleted my MySpace when the initial stalking began, but I created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. There was only pictures of himself, and the rest of the information was vague. My friends and I gently tried to discourage her from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down. Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and I found myself finding any excuse I could to avoid coming home. One day, I came home from work and found Matt on my couch alone, drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work and she told him he could just hang out. I was furious because I didn't want to spend any time with him, so I grabbed a beer and a snack and headed off to my room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so, he knocked on my door and suggested we watch some TV and get to know each other better because we both loved Ashley. I didn't want to, but decided that maybe I needed to give it a try. He put on a movie, and I tried to just focus on the movie because I didn't want to talk. At one point I glanced over to Matt, and he was staring at me with a smile on his face. I snapped a "what" at him, and he just continued smiling and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked. He said nothing and went back to watching the movie, still smiling. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing up on my body. I excused myself and locked the door to my room. Another month or so went on, and I had managed to avoid being home for much anything beyond sleep and showering. Matt practically lived there and had even brought a bunch of his things to Ashley's room. I really didn't want to move again, but was beginning to look for other options. On their 6-month anniversary, I saw a huge banquet of flowers on the table, and an already opened card popped up next to it. I rolled my eyes and was about to leave when I decided to see what the weirdo wrote to her. When I opened the card, my heart started beating through my chest. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one my stalker had sent. I kept them as evidence and dug them out of my desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. I called the police first. As they were on their way, I called Ashley and asked her to come over. She was at work but said she would be there when she could. I was terrified to tell her because I knew she would be shattered. The police took a statement from me and actually went to Ashley's work to get more information from her, and they ended up breaking the news. Apparently, Ashley called Matt and left a furious message, even though the cops told her not to say anything, and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place he said he worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said he had been staying with friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state. She had never met a friend of his because he said they had a falling out because he was choosing to spend so much time with Ashley. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. We don't even know if Matt was his real name. The cherry on top of all this whole thing was when we went through Matt's things. He had left everything when we disappeared, and Ashley and I decided to go through everything. There was a duffel bag that was full of gym clothes, but in one of the compartments, there were about 10 pictures of me. All of them were taken from far away, with the exception of one of me sleeping. The sheets were current, so I know it had to have been at the current apartment. Before I started locking my bedroom door, a few pictures dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, which made us think that was him as well. 2 pairs of my missing underwear were there, and I shuddered to think what he did with the rest. A Starbucks lid with my red lipstick marks, a necklace I hadn't even noticed missing, a few other random sick souvenirs. The police never tracked him down. I decided to accept an opportunity overseas that I hadn't been considering and got the hell out of there. Unfortunately, Ashley and I quickly drifted apart. She had a really hard time accepting that her first love was a complete psycho. I think I had some underlying anger for believing all of his lies and letting him into our lives. I don't know what his end game was. Would he have tried to hurt me? Or was he simply content with being in my world? I'll never know. Being stalked changes you. Even when I lived across the world, I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went. I still have no social media accounts attached to my real name. I am married with children and know that he moved on to torment some other poor woman. But every time I visit my hometown, I am tense and keep a low profile. Part of me will always worry that Matt will resurface again.
This primarily happened to my mum, but this has badly affected me mentally with worry as well. She wanted me to post this just to give people a heads up that you can encounter creeps literally anywhere. This is going to be long-winded, sorry, but I just wanted to get in every detail possible. This happened last month, and we still don't actually know what happened with Jeremy in the end. I'm a 19-year-old female who is studying in a university in England. Entering my second year last month, we decided to stay in my university town the day before I was due to move into my student home, so I could get there early and move my stuff in and give me the rest of the day to relax before we started Freshers Week. The night before moving day, me and my mother stayed in a hotel located in my university town. We were greeted by a very friendly man called Jeremy. Jeremy was very attentive and showed us to our room and stayed around 10 minutes telling us the story of the hotel and repeatedly asked us if we needed help unpacking and stuff, which we kindly rejected. It was a Friday, so me and my mother went around the town and had a few drinks, nothing too heavy as Freshers Week started the next day, so I wanted to be fresh for Saturday night. Before going out, Jeremy explained that he never works weekends, so he told us to have a good night and wished me luck with the rest of my university journey. He gave me a hug and gave my mother a hug and a slight kiss whilst moving his hand down towards her bum, which she found weird but brushed it off as nothing. My mom is 37 but looks young for her age, and Jeremy is easily in his 40s, so we thought that Jeremy may have fancied his chances with her. Moving on. Me and my mom have a great night around the town and watch a couple of live bands and have a few wines, so we are a little on the tipsy side. We get back to the hotel and the bar is still open, so we decide to have a nightcap. Whilst we are having a drink in the bar, Jeremy emerges from a back room and spots us and makes a couple of jokes. Jeremy then proceeds to watch a video on his phone on full volume of a woman screaming at the top of her lungs as if she were being murdered. The screaming was blood-curdling and made me and my mom unsettled, and also another couple in the bar looked a little concerned as well. The video went on for 3 to 4 minutes before Jeremy laughed and went into the back. When we make our way to bed, my mom had taken her shoes off after they had become painful from dancing in the bars earlier. Jeremy emerges from the back room and puts his arm around my mom and says, "Oh, let me help you to your room, honey. You must be wasted after all of that drinking." My mom isn't actually that drunk and insists she is fine, but Jeremy persists and basically follows us to our room and proceeds to come in. But I bid him good night and close the door pretty much in his face before locking it. The next morning, we are up early and make our way down for breakfast. The young girl working takes our breakfast order, only for Jeremy to bring them out, insisting the eggs are cooked to perfection, although he claimed he never worked weekends. Me and my mom are weirded out by Jeremy at this stage and check out straight after breakfast. Jeremy sees us out and says these exact words: "I'll be seeing you very soon, Christy," my mother's full name. Anyway, at the time it doesn't strike us as unusual, and my mom drives us to my new home and helps me unpack and stuff. She helps me to unpack and then leaves early in the afternoon as she had work that evening in our local bar. The rest of the day goes by without much going on. But that night, I'm out drinking with my housemates and I get a call from my mom saying that Jeremy had just come into the bar where she works. This is no coincidence, as when we were having our nightcap, Jeremy would have heard us talking about the bar where my mom works, and he also had our address, which needed to be provided at the hotel for whatever reason. He had also said to my mom when she was pouring his pint that she should go around to his friend's house after her shift, which was just around the corner. This call really scared the shit out of me. About an hour later, my mom called me and said that Jeremy had left the bar after she rejected his offer to go to his friend's house later, but Jeremy had said he'd be back for her later. This was really worrying, and I got her to make sure a customer was with her as she was locking up on her own that evening. After this call, I felt sick and didn't join my friends in going to the nightclubs. In the meantime, I called my dad, who no longer speaks to my mom. They aren't on bad terms, they just choose not to keep in contact with each other after they split a few years ago. My dad is a club bouncer, but he wasn't on duty that night. But I called him and begged him to just drive down there and make sure everything was okay. My dad clearly knew by my shaky voice that I was panicked, scared, and helpless. 1 a.m. rolled around and I didn't get a response from either my mom or my dad's phone. I was worried sick and hoped that Jeremy hadn't been waiting around a corner and done something to my mom when she was locking up. At 1:30 a.m., my mom finally rang me in hysterics. As she had been locking up, Jeremy had pulled up in a car with 3 other men and shouted at her to get in the car for a ride. My mom declined his advances and he got out of the car and approached her and told her that he wouldn't tell her again. He said she had been flirting and teasing him ever since she checked in last night. She told Jeremy that is complete bullshit and she wasn't at all into him. As Jeremy got closer to her, she could smell heavy liquor. As Jeremy went to grab my mom, my dad pulled up behind the car and beeped his horn. This caused Jeremy to go back to the car and climb back in, and he then tells my mom that he knows where she lives and he'll be waiting. The car screeched off. My dad then gets out of his car and told her that I had told him to check on her. Scared to go home alone, she asked my dad to drop her off at my grandmother's house as she didn't want to be alone. After that night, we never saw Jeremy again, but my mom did make a report to the police about him and gave them a full account of what happened, but she hasn't heard back from them yet. I'm just so relieved that my dad turned up to the pub when he did, as Jeremy could have easily been able to get my mom into that car, because she is only very small in stature, 5'2" and around 120 pounds. I just hope that scumbag got what was coming to him and is behind bars. My mom has been pretty badly affected by this and is only now comfortable being alone in her house. So, Jeremy, I hope you rot in hell, and let's never, ever meet again.